Today, we're talking about Piers Morgan, a subject that Piers Morgan always really loves. But we're talking about Piers Morgan in the context of GB News and posing the question, should GB News hire Piers Morgan? And that's the suggestion. The hot media rumor is that Piers Morgan is going to be hired by the new channel in the UK, the new anti-woke channel, if that's fair. I'm Iain Martin, editor of Reaction. I'm joined by Tim Montgomerie, my colleague at Reaction. And Tim, just walk us through this. Piers Morgan, big figure in UK broadcasting, now doesn't have a gig in broadcast terms. Of course, he writes for the Mail, and he writes a lot for Twitter. But the thinking is that he may be hired as the person to give GB News a big boost.
Yeah, well, this has been a rumour ever since he walked off the GMB show, Good Morning Britain show in March, I think it was, over Meghan Markle. And, it keeps sort of ebbing and flowing. But in the last week or so, two people who should know have said that it seems to be a live possibility again. I haven't been able to contact Piers to confirm or not deny this because he's blocked me on Twitter. I made the error of pointing out his hypocrisy over the COVID thing when he was emphasising the importance of lockdown. And then when his own son went on a Black Lives Matter protest, it was all okay again then. So, don't, whatever you do, pinpoint Piers' hypocrisy. But despite all of that, I'm really torn on this issue. I can see the advantages and the disadvantages. I don't have anything personal against Piers, but we're not in touch anymore.
Yeah, I mean, he is a very clever broadcaster and an exceptional media operator. It's fair to say, though, isn't it, Tim, that he is Marmite? I mean, even some of the people who watch him a lot and pay a lot of attention to Piers Morgan find him quite annoying from time to time. The channel would be getting someone very controversial. Would the aim be to attract as much attention as possible, simply to boost audience?
I think so. I think GB News is on a little bit of an upward swing at the moment. It obviously had a slightly difficult launch, let's just put it like that. But the Farage programme that started at 7 o'clock every night is beating Sky and BBC equivalents in that slot. I think the move of Simon McCoy to the breakfast show has definitely sort of reinforced that. There seems to be, more of a professionalism to that particular slot. I think the Liam Halligan, Gloria Di Piero afternoon shift, there's real chemistry between them. And then there's certain they're really doing YouTube quite well. So you're getting things like Neil Oliver, the Coast guy that many people are familiar with from the BBC. Those are real YouTube hits are taking off. They seem to have taken quite a bit of the advice that Reaction dispense. Maggie Pagano and I did a little video a couple of weeks ago, said the kind of things that they should do, including have news bulletins.
What a crazy idea!
Exactly,
putting news bulletins on a news channel. But it was a really good list. So sorry, the others were.
No, I think those are the other one was sort of cutting some of the presenter slots, which they've done. We did say that they should keep Guto Harry, who famously took the knee on one programme and caused a semi-boycott by viewers. They didn't take that idea. I think it was too far gone that Guto was on the sort of exit slope by that stage. But generally, I think that some of the, what I understand is that certainly the video we produced was well circulated around the company and amongst senior staff. And I've had nothing but positive responses from people saying that there's more changes underway. And so one of the things we suggested that it's quite a lot for any presenter to do 3 hours and that it should be shorter. And I understand that's going to begin to happen. It's already happened with Michelle Dewberry, and I think it will happen with a few of the other presenters as well. But even with all of that, it was always going to be, a new venture is always hard to take off. And I think the idea is that Piers Morgan coming in would just give you in immediate, a new audience. Yes, he's a Marmite, as you say, Iain, but look at the ratings of Good Morning Britain since he left. Occasionally they do slightly better, but he got to peaks, often getting quite close to the BBC breakfast show that GMB has never got since. Whether you like him or not, he gets ratings. You pay for it, the sort of astronomical fees that has sort of been rumored that would needed to be paid in order to get him to sign on the dotted line, are expensive. But they've got some big investors, GB News, and it might be worth getting him, because it will probably solidify the whole of the channel.
Yeah, I think there is that sense, though, that he probably expected, having walked out of GMB. Of course, everything in media is disrupted even more than normal because of the pandemic, but that there might be something potentially happening in the US as well. So there was all of that swirling around. So he needs a big TV gig as well to complement his mail stuff. Yeah, he is, as I said earlier, he's a one-man walking news machine in terms of the way he creates rows. And you can tell just the way in which he lights up Twitter deliberately, usually with precisely the sort of people he can't stand. He's toying with them and playing with them. I think almost 8 million followers. It's completely deliberate when he decides that he's going to say something provocative about the Olympics and silver medals and bronze medals not being worth the cause of, not worth celebrating.
You could be sure, though, if he'd ever won a silver or a bronze medal, Iain, we would never ever have heard the end of it. But yeah, he's against them for other people apparently until he was able to get one.
Is he? I mean, does he really care that much about it, or does he just understand how the energy of a news story works and what people will respond to for clicks and for likes? So I suppose that's what they get. It'll if they do hire him, it also then, of course, that they have Farage, as you described. I have to confess, I haven't watched the show, and I was going to, if you ask me what did I make of its progress in the last few weeks, I would say, actually, and I know I've been away on holiday for some of it, it hasn't become a staple in my viewing.
No.
I see it a lot on YouTube and in Twitter, the Twitter game it's playing. I can see what they're doing, and they're obviously investing a lot of money in creating these clips and promoting them, and so something has improved there, but it's not part of my sort of news diet, or it's not wallpaper in the background if I'm working or writing something and feeling that I need to know what GB News is up to.
Yeah.
And I know I'm not necessarily the audience they're targeting, but they do just need it to become a go-to part of the news system, don't they? And they must be worried that that's not yet the case. Otherwise, they wouldn't be making these changes.
No, I think there's improvement. And the slot on the Farage program I really like is Talking with Pints, where he actually spends a reasonable amount of time, 15-20 minutes, with someone like Anne Widdecombe. The other night it was Ken Livingstone. He had a big plaster on his under both eyes and a big black eye. He'd fallen over a dog, he said, but it looked like, if you joined a little bit late, that him and Farage might have been doing more than having pints together, but having a brawl. But it's good.
Yeah, a pint with Farage, what could possibly go wrong?
Just one pint, it might be okay, but you don't imagine it's more. It could easily be more than one with him. But one of the mysteries, of course, with GB News at the moment is what's happened to Andrew Neil. Is he coming back? Because his slot at the moment is being filled by Colin Brazier, very ably, but it's not the sort of forensic must-watch TV that someone like Andrew Neil can bring. Now, what I don't know,
he's my former boss and friend for many years. He's the standout political interviewer. People use the word forensic, but it's that was one of the great sort of promising things about the show, that would since he'd left the BBC, he'd have a chance to do that for them. It seems to be that he is returning, which will give them a boost in September. So your suggestion is that then Farage, Morgan, and Andrew Neil then gives them a formidable lineup.
Well,
in the
it may well be that Piers Morgan will want to go back to the morning and take on Good Morning Britain directly. I don't know, but ideally, I would think if you had Farage, Neil, Morgan, that's pretty impressive TV, the course of an evening. And the advantage I think Morgan brings is, I had a period when I loved Morgan when he was pro-Brexit. He was a Remainer, but he turned to be, said, we had to accept the referendum result. And, he bashed everyone who disagreed with him. You don't get nuance with Piers Morgan. It's 100% or nothing. Then, of course, he became a complete lockdown enthusiast, and the government couldn't do enough to tackle COVID. And he was therefore bashing, the same Brexit supporting Tories that until recently he'd been an ally of. And that's annoying. and his black and white view of the world is annoying. But actually, I think it would be good in some ways for GB News to have someone with that different perspective, because at the moment it's a very sort of lockdown skeptic, COVID, relaxed, if you like, channel. And I think Piers Morgan, he's not a conventional capitalist Brexit right wing, or however you want to describe it, in a way that Fox News is, or sometimes people sort of caricature GB News. So he would actually perhaps mix up the political feel of the channel as well.
He got very angry, didn't he, during the lockdown thing? That's what made it, in the end, for me, as someone who had, I thought that show was really good, for example, during the general election, where they just brought something different to political coverage. And I thought that was an example of his style working well. And then when you got to the pandemic, I just found his fury off-putting. And that, I was going to ask you about that angry approach, because does it fit the mood of the times, actually? I mean, I find people who are completely convinced one way or another on aspects of the pandemic, I find that off-putting, because who hasn't in the last year and a half learned a lot about complexity? I mean, the scientists who were vindicated and were criticizing the government on expecting to be vindicated on the July the 19th great reopening, suddenly we learn about fallibility again, and scientific fallibility again, and no one can quite explain exactly what's going on with the numbers. And that applies on the other end, those of us who were maybe a bit too optimistic last autumn, as I certainly was, thinking that the worst was over, and then of course we got clobbered by an unknown. So I would just pose you the question, Tim, does that matter in TV? Am I looking for too much nuance, or is the fact that do people want to be stoked up and angry? Is that what the GB News audience wants at certain times of the day? They want to have not their prejudices confirmed, but they really, they want it told to them as they want to hear it.
I don't know. I think partly they want to be entertained, maybe, or there's enough of an audience just to want to be entertained. My big criticism of Piers Morgan would be, I don't think he's a seeker of truth. He is an entertainer, but a lot of the news is like that. And, you were mentioning his Twitter, his ability to really manipulate and excite Twitter. There is a sort of a group of people, they all feed off each other. Alistair Campbell attacks what Piers Morgan says, then Piers Morgan attacks Alistair Campbell, then Gary Lineker comes in, and they're all feeding off each other, really. In a way, they're supposedly opponents disagreeing with each other, but they're all building up each other's traffic and retweets. And of course, one of the things that Piers Morgan got sort of famous for was, he was Britain's #1 champion of Donald Trump, at the beginning of Donald Trump's presidency. They fell out, as Piers Morgan tends to fall out with most people after a while, as far as I can work out. But, what it is, he is a Trumpite, really, in how he uses social media. He bashes the people he interviews. It's entertaining. We're gripped by it until we're not gripped by it. And suddenly it becomes distasteful. It becomes boring. We just know it's an act. And I don't like what the likes of Piers Morgan are essentially doing to our media, because they take entrenched positions, and then the only thing they really ever do after that is try and prove that they were right all along. And they don't really ever sort of reflectively explore a topic and inform their viewers. So if I was designing an entertainment or a media strategy for enlightening the public, Piers Morgan would not be the first person I thought of, probably one of the last people. But if I'm thinking of creating a bit more diversity on my channel than I have at the moment of opinion, if I'm thinking of getting ratings, I could absolutely see why you'd be attracted to Piers Morgan. I would just try and have, one of the recommendations on the show I did with Maggie the video I did with Maggie a couple of weeks ago was, bringing people like Unheard to run an hour on GB News, bringing people like the New Culture Forum, bringing people like Reaction, even, people that, are actually more interested in a sort of more nuance, to use your word, just a more open discussion where the end isn't ratings, but, actually some light rather than heat.
It's interesting, though, this format debate, isn't it? Because I had an email last night from a highly valued, trusted media pro who was critiquing one of our videos, and sort of made the point, and here I am again. He said, make your questions really crisp and clear. Tim's being much clearer than you are. Fair enough. And I, of course, that's
was that my mum emailing you again, Iain?
It wasn't actually, but a highly experienced journalist, and we got into a bit of a discussion about this. And I see what he means, but the assumption, and then YouTube and podcasts, of course, are different and have created a space for a different kind of format. Whereas what we're having here is not a conventional 4 or 5 minute conversation. When people like us and lots of other people are doing it as well, having conversations on YouTube or on podcasts, it is a genuine conversation, sometimes with short and sharp questions, but sometimes a digression. And I mean, I wonder, on GB News, that's what I expected a bit more of from them, which, but as I say, I haven't really, I'm judging it on having tuned in early on, and I must now start to pay a bit more attention to it. Final question from me, short, sharp, crisp question. Does it matter, and I've got to take on this as well, does it matter if GB News survives or not?
Yeah, I think it matters a great deal. And it's part of the reason why I've been watching it. I think lots of our friends are involved in this channel, Iain, people we know and love and respect. And I think there's generally something, I'm planning at the moment a series for Reaction at the end of this month on what BBC America isn't telling us about the United States. Really good people, Jerry Baker not least, involved in helping me with this series. But there's a whole range of things on America's soaring crime rate in some of the inner cities, ballooning debt, the racial polarization that Biden is pursuing, the sleaze around Joe Biden. There's a whole range of topics. There's a recent academic survey that showed that the Democrats have moved further to the left than the Republicans have moved to the right. An academic survey, not put out by the Republican Party. You wouldn't know any of this if you followed John Sopel regularly and got your news about America entirely from the BBC. Apparently all the problems in the world are over now Trump has gone. It's far from the truth. And why I want GB, so a long way of getting to the point, but the why I want GB News to succeed is they are trying to look at issues outside of a formulaic way. I don't think they've got it quite right yet, but they're reaching for something important. Yeah. My worry is that they become a little bit too much like Fox News and not thoughtful enough. But
yeah. So, for example, the other night they had an interview with, without getting into critiquing individual strands of it, anyone can do this in any piece of media, but they had an interview with Gorka, the former Trump advisor, who's treated as though you're kind of interviewing James Baker or James Carville, some great sort of grand figure from American politics who really knows what he's talking about and deserves to be venerated. I'm not going to get into the the realities of it, but I mean, I just don't think that's a sensible way to approach American politics. Is that really, how credulous is the audience? Yes. How big is there an audience for just a straight down the line interview with Gawker?
They've definitely got to make it more balanced. Iain, can I ask you a final question? There, you've asked me a final one. Let me put it to you. I'm now going to put you in charge for the next few minutes of GB News. You've heard the. I
resign. I resign.
I can't do that. You've heard some of the arguments. I'm conscious that I've been doing more of the talking in this conversation. I think I almost feel like I'm a Reactions GB News correspondent at the moment. But what would you do? Forget the budget for the moment. It would probably be a big one if he is to be wooed. But sign him or not, what would you do? And where would you put him in the schedule if you did hire him?
On the Piers Morgan question, I think media has changed enough that you could try it. I don't think there's the same, and this is one of the reasons. Just to quickly answer the question I asked you earlier: is it important it succeeds? And I just think all investment in journalism, considering what the tech giants have done to journalism in the West, it's important, and it's important that it thrives. We both, as you say, know a lot of people working there, and good luck to them. On the Morgan thing, then I would say give it a go for 3 to 6 months, targeted at the breakfast thing. I think you're absolutely right, and that's a score to settle. And but see how it goes. And I don't think there's then a price to pay in terms of consumer loyalty. People are used to experimentation in a way, so I would try that. I mean, I could be completely wrong, proving that I'm wrong about TV. I would go upmarket, actually. I would make it more elevated, more discursive. Yes, it needs some populism and some arguments, but I just think there's a danger for them in being too much the sort of GB News and putting the flag on everything and being too certain about everything. I would just make it a bit more. I think there is a hunger and an appetite for more in-depth conversation and variety. So I'd go up a notch. Now that's obviously going to infuriate some of the people who are there and who are upmarket journalists. But I just think how it felt to me around launch was not elevated enough. Does that answer the question?
It answers one of my questions. What and more, thank you. But where would you put him in the schedule is the other question. So
I did mean on the breakfast. Yeah, that's what I mean. I would target him at trying to take on GMB and creating a noise in the morning and trying to set the news agenda. Yeah, which is very much set by responding to what the newspapers have got in them, sparking comment and discussion, and creating then viral clips which dominate the agenda up to lunchtime and sometimes beyond. So make it a much watch thing for journalists and for the media class that then creates all those clips and creates stories and talking points and try and use that to prepare to launch the day. That's how I would do it. But then that's probably, I don't know anything about the negotiations. That would be more expensive than giving him an hour twice a week in the evening, for obvious reasons. It's a different proposition and requires then a different structure in terms of researchers and how you build it. But if they're really serious about deploying Morgan in terms of where he's good, that's how I would use him. Use him to start and drive the day, and try and create a contrast with the other channels and present them as being dull. So that's what I would do. But so shall we wrap up there?
You can resign now, as now you've made these decisions.
I resigned at the beginning.
I know, but I wouldn't let you. But I'm letting you resign now.
Or I'm being fired. That's actually my suggestions are so
Alan Sugar,
I'm being
you're fired. Yeah, well,
Or Donald Trump's Piers
and
Morgan.
the next instalment, should they hire Alan Sugar?
And on it goes. If you're not a subscriber to Reaction, we're talking about GB News there, but if you're not a subscriber to Reaction and you like these sort of reflective conversations and our analysis of the news, making sense of the news from a Reaction perspective, well, just click subscribe on the button below, and also go to the site and you can subscribe to the site. You get my weekly newsletter and all sorts of stuff being a subscriber, or actually soon to be renamed a member. Join the membership of Reaction. Thank you very much for listening.